So today we have Malia Lazu, who is the executive director and founder of Urban Labs. So thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Of course. And as you know, I'm Fatima Dainkeh, and I'm currently the Racial Justice Senior Coordinator here at YW-Boston.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're so excited to have you today.
Thank you.
And just want to learn more about what you do. So I know, as you probably know, YW-Boston has a lot of programs. And today what we want to talk about is our Dialogues program, right? And our Dialogues program is pretty much a way to have a conversation with members of organizations, schools, nonprofits, and to talk about race. You know, sometimes race and racism, people are afraid to talk about that. And so we want to be able to introduce that conversation, and then from there, help organizations really think about how do they make their own organizations more equitable. So I know you're over there at Urban Labs and doing similar work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can you tell us more about what you do?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on. I love these conversations and love the YW. So it's great to have the combo. I guess I'll say that I started off as an organizer years ago, and was really very much embedded in the nonprofit space. Mm-hmm. And what I saw there was that we were doing some great work. And so after doing that for, more years than we're going to talk about, that we're going to name, I decided that I really wanted to work with companies and different organizations that were in finance and real estate to really try to make a dent in the corporate side.
So I'm hearing like you use the term diversity, and I think that a lot of times people have various definitions of what that is. I know when we work with organizations, when we get into the room and we have these dialogues, and then after a dialogue or a workshop, they're like, okay, the first thing we need to do is make our hiring more diverse. We need to bring in more people that look different, right? And so back to what you were saying about checking the box, and sometimes we want people to move from there and really think about equity and inclusion. And so that's like a buzzword now, DEI. Like, what does that mean? And I'm interested to learn, how are you using that word? And also, if you are using those phrases, like those words, when are you using them, right? Are you using diversity for certain organizations that might be in like entry level in understanding this work, and maybe using equity for organizations that are more like, okay, we got the checking the box part. We want to make sure that our structures are equitable.
Great question. And I think, words, they're so important. And then as certain things grow, they become more and more meaningless, mm-hmm. right? And I think, when I was a kid, the term was affirmative action. What's the next? Oh, diversity and, diversity, then diversity and inclusion, and now equity. And I think it's a search for impact. I think that where I sit with it is I love the framework belonging, and, because ultimately I think that is where we want to go. You want a culture that is open and curious about the other, mm-hmm. right? Not fearful and presumptuous.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think sometimes people might hear belonging and they're like, oh, this is really woo-woo and mushy, right?
It totally is.
And it's okay.
Yeah. It needs to be, and that's one of the things that I tell my clients all the time is it's like, this actually is a place where like your personal needs to be in the room.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I really, really love what you're saying. I think especially because, it's beautiful, especially because as someone who facilitates dialogues and is in that space, right, a lot of times people are like, we need to make a difference, we need to make a change. And this point that you're bringing up about your whole self is really important, right? Because in order for us to talk about systemic change, we forget that people make up systems, right?
That's it. And that you're a product of the system.
Yep.
Right? I mean, one of the things I'm so thankful for with these millennials and youngers is that I'm wearing my hair natural more than I ever. So it's so wonderful to see millennials be like, no, I'm going to show up to work like this. Like, this is a professional look. And because it is, and it feels so liberating for me to be able to work through my own bias that I had against myself from the system that I was raised in. And, that, and it's that intimate. Once, I think we rush so into tangible action, right? And that's where we end up saying, we need to hire people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, you don't. Not if they're going to come in and feel like another.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're going to be shooting yourself in the foot.
Exactly.
That's not going to be helpful.
Exactly.
Right? So why don't we just figure out why you haven't been able to bring in anyone in the first place, right? And you want to do that internally, right? You don't want to do that by hiring folks and have them telling you on Twitter or on Glassdoor, right? Yeah. You want to do that, amongst small groups, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think even this idea of getting to action, I try to remind people a lot that first, we don't have the relationships we need right now to get to the place we want to go, right? And that's important. And the second piece is, so therefore, right, we actually need to build different kinds of relationships, and that takes time.
Yes, I love what you're saying there, because I think a lot of times when we're following up with organizations up to a year, it's okay, we feel like we aren't moving. We're at 6 months, we aren't moving, right? And just hearing you talk about what it might look like in such a heavy topic, right? We're talking about racism, all these various isms that are really impacting people, right? And so how do you work within the system and build that momentum, because the work has been here before we were here? And then, but you don't hear a lot of people talking about the other side, right? How do you speak and work with allies when the work is heavy? And so I'm also interested in the work that you've done with either leaders and point people, people who are carrying that work and that's very heavy for them. What are some tips that you would probably give to them, especially as you're doing the work as well?
Yes. Yeah. So the first tip is, again, to experience as much as possible. Leaders are smart people. They didn't get to lead because they don't know anything. And so the more they understand the issue, and the more it becomes less heavy. One of the things, I guess another best practice that I would say is that if this is to last, it cannot be miserable. And then one of the last things I would say is that it's important for leaders to love themselves. And not in an ego way, but to allow themselves to become vulnerable, to have the strength, to have the self-assuredness. I mean, the clients that I see, us making the most impact, are out to learn. It's like when you start a training or something, and someone's like, "I'm colorblind," and they think that means they're ahead of the game. It's the clients that are actually the most confident. And obviously in the fields I work a lot with, a lot of the people in power are white men. And it's the ones that are the most confident that'll be like, yeah, what do we got to do?
I'm also just so interested to hear about what are people doing, right? And so you've done just an amazing job just framing what it looks like to do this work, right? And the fun and holding hands, and it is going to be rough, and the willingness, unwillingness, right? What are some things that people are doing? I know for us, people are okay, we want to start a resource group, or sometimes we call it a racial affinity group, because we think this is important for us to do right now. We want to have these conversations. What are some other innovative ways or different strategies that certain people are using that you've seen that is working to move the needle for DEI?
Absolutely. So yeah, definitely the dialogues, right, that people are having. And I think, the spaces that you guys hold, you see the importance of that facilitated safe space, right? Where different people can come together, and that's just critically important. Folks are also wanting to do summits and, bring people together. That way, you see what the pace setters are trying to do. And I think all of that stuff's great. It's great that folks are sort of moving beyond the trainings, to be how do we get in dialogue? And, and for me, quick plug, if this is aired before June 19th, come to the Museum of Fine Arts. But, that Juneteenth at the Museum of Fine Arts for me is one of the things I'm the most proud of. Last year we had, over 5,000 people come. We showed Black Panther in the park, but those kinds of experiences are what you need for your employees, right? Or what you need to understand new consumer markets, and are what you need to understand how to move into the 21st century, and not be the icebox, right? Not be the disc man, right? But understanding what the future is, because these generations, they're not playing around.
We're not.
Thank you for not, okay? As someone who's organized, like, you know, it's like, yes, quit that job because it's not worth nothing. You know what I mean? Like, let's get there. And I think we finally have been able to, like, deconstruct enough that we have this next generation of, I don't want to say, like, hippies, but I think, like, as much change as happened during my parents' generation of just non-compliance.
Just thinking about everything that you said and just wrapping it up, it is about being in community, right? And talking about our own selves and how we do this work together. And you've made that very clear. So it's been amazing talking to you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody.
Of course, absolutely. So where can they find you?
So you can find me at theurbanlabs.com. And so come and holler. You can also find me on the socials. It's at The Urban Labs with a Z instead of an S.
Amazing. And everything Malia has just said is super amazing. As us as YW, we try to do that work, talking about what it means to think about the structures that are affecting us and thinking about what it means to be honest, right? And so if you want to learn more about YW Boston, the programs that we provide, and specifically our Dialogues program, feel free to visit our website, ywboston.org. Just thank you so much for spending time with us. And thank you again.